Am I too obsessed with the 3.0 update? Maybe, but I know you are too. It's been so much fun to come through the very long, direct style video they dropped and see all of the secrets and hidden changes they're making with this new patch. And there are a surprising amount which most of us have just glanced over, not giving a second thought. This doesn't just apply to new features either, but really fun little secret details which make the game feel even more immersive. So that's what we're taking a deep dive into here, a proper magnifying glass style look into the 3.0 update and some of the secrets that we can find. So leave a like on the video if you're excited and let's jump into this. Now, as we know, the Switch 2 is getting an upgrade for New Horizons specifically, where you'll be able to play with even more people online than ever before, and they've actually had to make some small changes to be able to properly accommodate this within the game in very subtle ways. And the first we can see in the Roost, where you meet up with your friends. They've actually added in a few extra stalls to accommodate more space for extra players if you're playing on the Switch 2 version, which is really interesting. It's a very small and subtle change, but it definitely makes a lot of sense, so no one will feel left out. I do wonder if they could actually utilize this change to allow more groups of special characters to meet up, as they wouldn't be as limited with seating space now. But at this point, we just know it's a meeting up with your friends. Speaking of online and friend features, of course the new Slumber Islands are a massive new online feature which will add a ton of longevity to the game, given the fact you'll be able to play with your friends and create islands from scratch with them. It's worth noting that you will need Nintendo Switch Online to be able to access these, which I know not everyone will be super happy about, but that's how they've decided to do this. I guess it's the same as the Dream Islands feature, which is already in the game, and kind of what they did back in Animal Crossing New Leaf as well. I do think that's a bit unfortunate though, given the fact you can play Slumber Island solo if you want to. But like I mentioned, there are a ton of unique changes here which are different from regular islands. For example, we can see that when the Slumber Island screens load up and you can choose between a map, they do not have the dock. The dock, the pier, whatever you want to call it, is not present on Slumber Islands. So you can't do fishing from there, you can't, get the hotel there, I suppose. It's unknown whether you'd be able to add it later, but I'm kind of assuming that is not the case. This is definitely very interesting given the fact that the dock, the pier, became a massive part of this new update with a hotel. It also seems like potentially we might be able to have more than 10 villagers living on these Slumber Islands. You can of course summon in island residents to come and live on them, but I noticed that there's actually more slots for these beyond the 10. It seems like there's an extra 6 slots for villagers, which is really interesting, so it does make me wonder if you'll be able to increase that cap somehow. It could even depend on the island size you're choosing, since it can go between small, medium and large, so maybe if you pick the large option you can have a few more. I'm not entirely sure, but it's definitely interesting to think about. Speaking of the different island sizes, one limitation that has been removed from the very small islands is you don't have river mouths. So that's something you don't have to worry about at all. Whilst you might have a lot more limited space with how you can decorate, of course, they don't necessarily have to have them. Now we noticed that 2 of these maps actually do, but you can also get ones that have nothing. So if you want a little bit more space and you don't want to have to worry about not being able to terraform the river mouths, then it might be a good option just to choose the completely blank ones and add the river on as you choose. The small islands in general are incredibly interesting, and it's going to be fascinating to see what limitations they have compared to larger size islands. I kind of wish we could use these on our main playthroughs, honestly. Speaking of the Slumber Island layouts, they don't seem to be matching up with any of the default layouts that you can get when starting a new island. They all seem to be different. Now there are some elements that are the same, but overall they are definitely unique and a lot more simplistic compared to the ones that we can get when choosing our main island. For example, the one in the bottom left corner of this screenshot and the one in the right corner actually just have 2 little tiny river mouths kind of parallel to each other, which is really interesting. It does seem like, however, all of the large size islands will have 2 river mouths. So again, that might be something for you to consider if you're worried about not being able to change that. It would be very cool if in this update they gave us a little surprise and actually allowed us to customize the river mouths, but I'm not so sure they'll do that. I did notice that for the medium-sized island layouts, they only have one river mouth, so maybe that could be a good little compromise in between if you don't want to deal with it. Also, a viewer, Erin Brogan, reached out to me and sent me this screenshot, which kind of shows that we might even be able to have a fourth layer on these Slumber Islands. If you sort of count up, it does appear like we would get that fourth layer, which was previously a thing back in Animal Crossing New Horizons before they decided to patch that glitch out. Maybe this time around it'll be an actual feature, since the Slumber Islands might not have as many limitations as the actual island we live on. It could of course just have been terraformed and maybe you can't get up there, or it could be Nintendo doing that thing they do sometimes with footage, where they're just showing off things that actually aren't technically possible. But I did think this was really interesting all the same, and it would be cool if we were able to decorate the fourth layer on these Slumber Islands, and maybe even if that encouraged them to bring that feature slash glitch back to the main Animal Crossing game. Because hey, giving us more options to decorate is always a good thing in my opinion. Also, more of a fun little detail, but everyone appears to wake up in the bed they went to sleep in, which is very cute. This is exactly what you do on the regular Dream Islands, but it's great that they've applied this to all of your friends as well. What will be especially interesting though is how all of these players load in. Do we have to wait for them one at a time to come into the island, kind of like we do with regular online, or can they just kind of pop in the background whilst we're doing other things? I'll be really curious to see what changes and hopeful improvements they've made. Otherwise, Dream Slumber Islands could potentially take a very long time to get going when you're playing with friends. Now we're moving away from the Slumber Islands to move on to other parts of the update. For example, when Resetti uses his new feature to clear out spots on your island, we can notice that he doesn't actually clear away everything. We can see that he leaves the pathways behind. So in terms of terraforming, it seems like Resetti doesn't get rid of that. He'll pretty much just be removing things like trees, flowers, and any items or custom designs that you put down. Don't get me wrong, that's still incredibly cool, so I'm not saying that as a negative, but I just wanted to keep people's expectations in check with this feature, that yeah, he can definitely do a lot, but there are still certain limitations that we are going to have to face when having him clear out spaces around our island. Now, the 3.0 update trailer did confirm to us visually that we will be able to find potential guests for the hotel just wandering around our island. And in the trailer, we specifically see Maggie walking around outdoors. However, it was confirmed on the official Japanese website through several screenshots that you will also be able to see these potential guests inside buildings too. The Able Sisters was confirmed, so we can assume Nook's Cranny will also be possible, but it might even be possible to see potential guests in places like the museum. I generally assume that anywhere a regular villager can kind of wander around, whether that's outdoors or in a building, you'll also be able to find a potential guest for the hotel. It's currently unknown how often these will spawn in, whether it's every day or a bit rarer, kind of like the campsite, but it'll be super intriguing to find out, and it's great that we can see more characters wandering around our islands aside from the 10 villagers that we have. Speaking of the hotel, we can see in the trailer that the little amiibo scanner you use if you want to invite a character in with that feature isn't something that is unlocked by default. Earlier on in the trailer we can see it is not present, so you have to meet certain requirements if you want to be able to use it. This is definitely interesting, and it does mean that for those special characters you want to invite, that's not something you can do immediately. You have to make a certain amount of progress. This does make a lot of sense. That's exactly how they did it, I believe, back in Happy in Paradise, so it gives you a chance to experience it through regular gameplay before you can just jump into doing everything with the amiibos, which I do actually think is pretty cool. Also, just more of a fun little detail, but hidden in the background of this little screenshot, we can see there are some Cap'n family photos of them setting up the hotel, enjoying some time on the beach, and also in Cap'n's boat too, maybe making their way over to our island. I really love little details like that. They make the game feel so much more alive. It's a fantastic little addition. We can also see behind Grams that there is a little refrigerator for the cucumbers that they absolutely love. Cap'n has mentioned this many times throughout the series, so it only makes sense that in his hotel he would have this available if the family want to take a snack at any time. I just absolutely love that little detail. It's a great little callback. It's also worth noting that since the hotel significantly expands the dock area of our island, that means there should be a lot more space to spawn in dock-specific fish. This is going to be very useful for people who are trying to complete their Critterpedia or maybe are doing certain types of challenges, as it should just give you a lot more space. Not to mention the fact that now you can tie that in with bulk crafting fish bait, so fishing is definitely getting a really interesting update this time around. It also does kind of seem like the player character in this screenshot is casting their bobber out a little bit further than I would usually expect. But I don't know if that's just something that is happening within the trailer, or if that is just generally something that'll be changed within this update. I guess we'll have to find out. Also, this is more of a small, silly one, but it's worth noting that the megaphone has significantly increased in price this time around with New Horizons. The item costs 3,500 bells, whereas in Animal Crossing New Leaf, where it was introduced, it was only 500 bells. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining, we all have a ton of bells at this point, but I do find it interesting that the Animal Crossing economy has absolutely shifted since Animal Crossing New Leaf, where this would now be a much more expensive item to get your hands on. We can now play the NES games once again in Animal Crossing New Horizons 3.0 update, coming back from the original Animal Crossing game nearly 25 years ago. What's interesting is the first one they showed off, which is Ice Climber, was actually considered one of the Forbidden 4 of games that were a lot harder to obtain back in the original. These were Ice Climber, Legend of Zelda, Mario Bros, and Super Mario Bros. So it seems like this time around they've made Ice Climber a lot easier for you to access, which is pretty cool. Obviously, no pun intended there. Back in the original Animal Crossing game, you had to obtain it in a letter from Tom Nook after the #1 Ice Climber Animal Crossing e-card is scanned at the ETM in the post office. So it wasn't exactly the easiest. The only one that was completely unobtainable back in the original game was the Legend of Zelda, and they haven't really shown that off here, so I'm guessing they're not going to finally give us that. But that would have been really neat if they decided that was something they wanted to do. Either way though, I absolutely love the Nintendo collaboration items, and I think it's so fantastic that we're finally getting some of them. However, just like the Slumber Islands, you will need an active subscription to Nintendo Switch Online if you want to be able to play these. It is quite unfortunate, as it does mean in the future these will technically become sort of lost media like a lot of features did back when they turned the servers off for New Leaf, but at least we shouldn't have to worry about this for quite a long time at this point. It's just interesting to see how things have changed in this regard since the original Animal Crossing game, where you can still play all of them to this very day. So yes, those are lots of hidden details and secrets within the 3.0 update video that I think you might have missed or you might enjoy learning more about. Let me know what you've discovered within this trailer, because there's honestly so much, and I feel like we're missing a ton of things too that Nintendo have probably been hiding. If you made it to the end of the video, be sure to comment Bob's Gang down below so I know you did. If you enjoyed, leave a like and subscribe and turn on notifications for more.